Hello and welcome to another episode of Taking Back Saturday, a Happy Buyers Club podcast where we break down the real estate market each and every Friday to help home buyers build confidence, follow a process and hopefully buy really happy. I'm your host, Chayse Jones, coming to you live from our new mic'd studio. And joining me on the other side of the desk is real estate daddy, Sam Hunter.
I don't think I've been this nervous for a podcast since episode 1.
If people are listening and they're like, who are these people? I've never heard these voices before. It's because we've gone from the $30 Kmart setup.
Thank you, Kmart,
to
by the way.
A little bit more than $30 roadie setup. And we are under the pump now.
Holy hell.
It's real.
Holy hell. We looked the part. Let's hope that we sound the part. We didn't buy the headphones because we didn't want to look like those wankers that wear headphones when they're talking to the same person in the same room. So who knows?
Cue us in 2 weeks' time with the headphones for sure.
If this sucks, expect headphones on the next video.
Guys, it's still business as usual here. We are here to sort of help people sort of navigate what is often a terrifying world of buying real estate. So hopefully we continue to add some value. We sort of gave ourselves a few months to see if this was our thing. And it meant that the Kmart mics had to go in the bin at some point. So hopefully this is just the start of the next tier of podcasting with us.
For sure. You may be able to better understand our mumbles now, which is very exciting.
Yeah, nice one. You don't have to crank it up to full volume. Today's podcast, Sam, was inspired by a Reddit post.
Reddit posts and plenty of DMs,
Yeah.
I reckon.
The particular Reddit post that I'm referring to was 2 weeks ago. Buyer beware. Properties selling with well-known Brisbane agency. Agents are encouraging sellers to engage a building and pest inspector proven to not report major structural defects. Public service announcement. You know, these guys have inspected 3 properties sold by the well-known Brisbane agency and have all had a building and pest report supplied by this one particular company. No reviews available online for that company. They've gone on to then employ their own independent inspector who found, significant moisture readings, cracked bathroom tiles, major defects to the foundations that, were a safety hazard. So
one report read well, another report not so well.
So, I mean, we've experienced something like this firsthand.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Often.
For sure. And that particular Reddit post definitely resonated with both of us.
We've read that report.
Yeah.
From that company and that inspector.
Yeah, mate. And the dead giveaway is the 3-page report with the Comic Sans font on the front and the disclaimer in the terms that says this company has opted to be exempt from the professional indemnity insurance required by the QBCC. Liability of the report is the amount of the service fee, a couple $100. No wonder buyers are terrified when they see stuff like that or read about it on Reddit.
Or worse, don't read that part of the report and just see that it says nothing wrong and then make a decision off the back of that. So we do hear about bad building and pests every week. We also see probably really good building and pests. We just read one before starting this and we're like, oh yeah, cool. Like genuinely built a bit of confidence in the property for us at least, which is a good thing. But we do get a lot of messages and there are always questions floating around the real estate internet, which is a weird place, right? Where it's, can you trust a report that is provided by a seller or a report that's provided by an agent? So we just thought we'd talk through that, but also like, what is a building and pest report? Why are they important? What happens when a seller provides one? Like, what are your rights? How do you navigate that? Because this is not the sexiest topic. But if you're buying a house, it's probably something you're going to come across.
It's a super real topic to talk about. And funnily enough, speaking of the one that we just read just before, the thing about a good building and pest report is that not the fact that it doesn't tell you anything about the property. It's not the case that if there's nothing to tell you on the report, that probably raises more questions. Every building and pest report is going to give you something.
Yeah,
it's normal to see defects on any property of any age. But we'll cover that off probably deeper into this podcast. From the top, Sam, what is a building and pest report for those playing along at home?
Tough question to answer. I'm reading the notes. The first question is, what is a building and pest report? And on the face of it, it is hopefully a qualified building inspector, somebody who has a Queensland, at least in Queensland, a Queensland builder's license, but they're also licensed to inspect and make commentary around common pests that you may see, i.e. termites. That's the real scary thing for a lot of people here in Brisbane. It rains a lot of timber houses, a lot of moisture. Termites love moisture and timber. Very conducive to that environment. It is a liable document that can be used for insurance purposes, insurance claims. It can be used to build confidence in a property. It can be used as a reason to walk away from a property purchase. It's a good piece of pre-contract and also then post-contract in some circumstances, due diligence that any buyer, any buyer's agent, ideally every seller, we're big fans of sellers providing building and pest reports, and we'll talk through that why in a second, should provide and get on a property just so that you understand what it is that you're buying.
Definitely. It's about the clear picture, right? Or the full picture.
Or as clear as you can get. Like hopefully there's not too many building and pest inspectors that listen to this show, but you'll get a report. A good one's maybe 30 or 40 pages. We've seen them up to 90 pages where genuinely there is nothing wrong with the property. They're just very detailed, and that's a good thing. And that is their job. They're paid $650 for maybe 90 minutes at a property and then putting that all together. And their job is to find everything. We say to every buyer, this report should find 40 or 50 things that are, in inverted commas, wrong with this property. Expect that the seller's not going to want to fix any of them. Correct. But it's good to know about them. And they will range from a crack in the roof to
one of the knobs on the oven is loose.
Is loose, to a door handle is a bit loose as well, to there's a crack in the tile, to there's some significant moisture behind the shower and perhaps that membrane needs to be replaced, to there's water ingress dripping from the roof, or you've got a slab with a crack in it. Minor stuff through to major stuff. They'll find issues and allow you then to make a decision based on the issues they find. What they won't do is they won't climb on roofs. What they won't do is they won't test electrics other than turning fans on or off or air conditioning on or off. They won't look at wiring. They won't go inside the walls. They won't rip up carpet and have a look underneath it to see if there's polished wood timber floors or anything like that. If there is a subfloor, they won't go inside it to have a look at it. It's a visual inspection only. So if they can't tap moisture meter or see their way to a problem, don't expect that a building and pest will find anything that isn't obvious. Does that mean they're worth the paper they're written on? Absolutely, because I think that they tell you if there's something obviously wrong, and that's really important when you're spending hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars.
Yeah, 100%. And it is about building confidence. It's about having peace of mind in what you have offered on, potentially have under contract, or potentially looking to offer on. It's not your brother's mate, Bill, who was a builder for a few years, coming through and, running his eye over the place and telling you it's rock solid.
Technically, my brother-in-law did do my building and pest inspection. Shout out, Tim. What's up?
Hey, listen, each their own. But no, best practice is finding a inspector who is covered for insurance, has the licensing to do so, and that perhaps you've seen an example of a report that they've done in the past. That's a great start point, I think, when you're trying to select a building and pest inspector that you would like to use. Obviously, we're going to go down the path of when a seller provides it, but I think if we were to offer on a property that didn't have a building and pest provide, we've got a few that we use regularly, and it's because before we ever used them for the first time, we had an opportunity to see their work. And we're like, that's the kind of report that I would like and I would want our buyers represented by. So if you are contacting a few different building and pest inspectors, ask for an example of a report if you haven't already seen one. And that way you can get a bit of a sense for how they do their inspections. On top of that, if we do then book them in for a said inspection, always join them.
For sure.
If you can, make sure you're there on the day, because a 90-page report, like you said, for a great property, that can be fairly intimidating for a buyer. But if you were there joining them like I would have on that particular day, you've got the context for every one of those 90 pages. You've had it walked through with you and you can ask them questions. You can get a clearer picture or a better understanding of what they mean when things are just adequate. Because for the most part, even if they're perfect, they're typically just adequate on the report.
I think that's a really good point to make. Like, their job is to find stuff. The insurances that they pay quite significant money for every year, just in case something is ever missed, they don't want to miss anything. So if something is good, they'll note that it is adequate. If something sucks, they'll tell you that it sucks, and they'll tell you who the right person is to explore that further if you want to. You made the point at the start of the show, like there's never a perfect building and pest report. And I'd question that more than the 3-page one that just says there's a couple of things, right? Because that means that they just haven't done their job. They haven't looked hard enough. That's what you want to see. If you get a report back that says, hey, there's 25 minor issues with this 4-bedroom property that's been around for 30 years.
You should be encouraged by that.
For sure. That's magnificent building and pest report, depending on what those issues are, of course. But they do separate them into minor and major. Major is the stuff that may warrant a conversation on a negotiation after the fact, whether that's price, whether that's terms. It may warrant pulling out the property altogether.
Correct.
But minors, everybody tries it on. I want you to fix the doorknob on the washing machine. And every seller says no. And so if you get a lot of minors, it is what it is. Make your decision. And the way in which contracts are written in Queensland are heavily in favour of the buyer. So if you have a building and pest clause, you've written that 7 days or 14 days in that standard term on an REIQ Queensland Law Society contract, that clause is to your complete satisfaction. Meaning that if you get a building inspector out there and they give you a report and it says it's perfect except for that one scratch of paint on one roof tile,
I'm not satisfied.
you can be not completely satisfied and you can pull out of that contract if you want to. Not that agents would do this, but it's why a lot of them are more than happy to have a finance clause on there instead of a building and pest clause, because a building and pest clause is a way bigger out for the majority of buyers than a finance clause is.
Yeah. Speaking of sellers and selling agents, if a report is provided by a seller during their campaign, obviously, should we be wary? I don't like. We've seen plenty in the past where you're like, oh, I think that warrants us getting our own report, but it's not until we have read and reviewed that report, contacted the inspector, asked them any questions, asked them for clarification on said report, asked them about the transfer of liability for that report. That is a really important step to take. If the seller has provided the building and pest report, you've had a read of it, your understanding of it. If anything you don't understand and you want clarification of, you've spoken to the inspector about, while you've got them on the phone, ask them about transferring that report. If you are the eventual buyer, how much is it going to cost? Well, are they able to transfer the liability of that report, and what is it going to cost? It's going to cost you a few $100s, but having that liability transferred is extremely important for you as the new buyer of that home.
I think a lot of people, when they see a report provided by an agent or provided by a seller, there's a level of distrust that's there, right? And that's from everyone has had a poor experience in real estate. That is just the reality of the market. The way that we like to think about it is, if you can imagine, it's like, this is for all the people born before the year 2000 listening to this show. If you can imagine that it is like a video game health bar. You're playing Street Fighter, right? And you got a health bar at 100. That's where trust needs to start between you and an agent when you first send that inquiry. If you don't have a relationship with the agent already and they haven't either kept the trust or lost it. It's the same when you're looking at a building report. Assume that it is 10 out of 10 done by a reliable inspector. They are licensed, they are insured, and they've done a really bang up job at finding all the minors and any majors. Read the report. Don't make any assumptions before you read it. If you've seen copies of reports in the past that have impressed you, that have given you the confidence to walk away, potentially, compare that report to those. What does it have that didn't? Does it have more than that one? Get to that point, understand where you are before you then decide, is this something that I want to rely on? From there, you can talk to the agent or you can call the inspector direct. Their phone number legally has to be on those reports. They will take that phone call, some nicer than others. But ask them, hey, if we buy this house, what's the process of us getting this report in our name? It might have cost $650 for the seller to get that report. Most building inspectors will transfer that liability to you for a couple of $100s. It's really, really important that happens. Because if you buy that property and the report is not in your name, the liability for that report doesn't matter to you. It's effectively like it wasn't there at all. If it is transferred into your name for a fee, if it's done free, talk to a solicitor, make sure that it is still liable to you. But in most cases, you need to pay for that liability, pay for that. So if it is transferred to you and you have paid a fee, could be $1, could be a couple $100, whatever it might be, then that inspector is liable to you for that report for a period of time. Building and pest reports don't last forever. Most of them last 90 days from the date that they were actually performed. It's why if a property has been on the market for a really long time and it's got a building and pest inspection from
3 months ago,
3 or 4 months ago, or someone, we actually see this, I would say once a month. Somebody bought a property 12 months ago. For whatever reason, they're
spinning it back around.
And they're like, we've got the building and pest from 12 months ago. I'll tell you what, 12 months is a really long time in Brisbane. There's some pretty interesting weather in Brisbane as well. 12 months is enough time for bugs to make a nuisance of themselves. Probably not going to fall the house down, but they'd certainly have a meal. You just wouldn't rely on that. You'd say, thank you so much. I'll read it. do they have any intention of getting an updated report, or when can I do my own? So just look at the date that it was done, get some confidence about what's in there, call the inspector if there's questions around there. So if he's like, the light switch didn't work, consider getting a licensed electrician to look at the wiring. Call him up and be like, what do you mean by it didn't work? Did the light turn on? Was it just wonky? Do you think there was any issues? Could you that smell you get when wires are starting to fray? Could you smell any of that? They'll tell you as much as they can, right? And then if you're going to use that report to purchase the property, get it assigned to you legally, pay for it so that liability sits with you, so that when you buy the property, if something then does go wrong, you've got a way to remedy that with that inspector if they missed something obvious.
If you're having these conversations with said inspector, or there is let's firstly cover that off. If you're not getting a sense of confidence from that inspector, your questions aren't being answered, maybe there is no ability for them to transfer the liability to yourself, you always have the option of getting one yourself.
100%.
Any selling agent that says that you can't perform your own building and pest, run.
Cooked.
Just get away from that property. Are there any things that are true red flags on a building and pest report? Are there any major defects that would be an automatic walk away for you?
Like load-bearing walls that are sinking or wonky, or
superstructural issues.
Yeah, so uneven floors, you'd want to understand why. If the roof's sagging, you want to understand why. If there's pretty clear water damage everywhere, you'd want to understand why. None of that may be cause to walk away. You might be looking for a project, and it could be how you can afford to get that project. But for most of it, I can't paint a wall, let alone look at a structural wall, right? So I'd be very cautious of anything that was structurally obvious, to the point where I probably wouldn't even ask the questions. I'd just walk away. I'd go and find a deal with less questions.
Yeah, but for the most part, understanding, getting context for any and everything that's been identified in that house is the most important thing. The more that you can understand, the more you can have confidence, and then it just makes it all the less terrifying, right?
For sure. We saw a property, this is the one that you went to, that you didn't know it had termites until you went there.
I would rather have told you in person than tell you on the phone. It's a much easier conversation to have face to face. You wouldn't have come otherwise. Of course I wouldn't have come otherwise.
For sure. So this was a property that was maybe not quite riddled with termites, but there were definitely active termites. And you don't see a lot of houses that make it to market with active termites. The sellers just didn't have the money to do anything about it. There was a building and pest report. It did identify the live termites. The house was actually still somewhat structurally sound, and it sold full well, because you can treat that sort of stuff. Like, live termites are less of a red flag to me than dead termites that have eaten the house all the way through, if that makes sense.
A full termite.
Yeah.
A hungry termite is better than a full termite.
Yep.
Well, I was told not to lean on the balustrading at that house. So listen, it was as unsafe to inspect as it was to potentially purchase. Hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of building and pest reports. Yes, buying a house can feel terrifying. Yes, having to put a building and pest clause on your contract, that should be something that does instill you with confidence, though. If you need any advice on the right people to call, or an example of what a good building and pest and a bad building and pest report looks like, reach out to us. We're always happy to help. Hopefully that was the most crystal clear podcast you've ever heard from Sam and Chayse at Taking Back Saturday. So he's Sam, I'm Chayse. Cue the song.